Coming up on The World Today. North Korea says it is severing communication ties with South Korea. The family of George Floyd mourn him ahead of the funeral. Plus, Britain has a rethink on schools reopening, while the WHO says COVID-19 is worsening globally. A warm welcome to the program. I'm Akaite Afia. Thanks for joining us. We begin with the news out of Africa as Burundi President Pierre Nkurunziza dies at the age of 55, having suffered a heart attack. The government says he had been admitted to a hospital on Saturday after feeling unwell. His condition was said to have improved, but on Monday he had a cardiac arrest and efforts to revive him were unsuccessful. Before his death was due to step down from the presidency in August, having been in power since 2005. He was to be replaced by political ally Evariste Ndayishimiye, who was declared winner of the presidential election in May this year. Nkurunziza's final year in office were racked by turmoil after he decided in 2015 to run for a third term. Let's move over to North Korea, which has made the sudden decision to sever communication ties with its neighbor, South Korea, including the hotline both share. Both have had troubled relations in recent weeks.
Indeed, North Korea says it is severing hotlines with South Korea as a first step towards shutting down all contact with Seoul, according to the country's state media, the KCNA. For several days, North Korea has lashed out at South Korea, threatening to close an inter-Korean liaison office. Another project of the South does not stop defectors from sending leaflets and other materials into the North. This morning, North Korean officials did not answer a routine daily call to the liaison office, nor calls on military hotlines. It did neither on Monday, also not answering the liaison phone call for the first time since 2018, though it later answered an afternoon call. Also on Monday, North Korean youths and students staged a large rally in Pyongyang, protesting against the South Korean government and defectors over the recent scattering of an anti-North Korea leaflet over the border. Video broadcasts on state media showed students and youth in face masks in an outdoor theater in Pyongyang, march in unison and holding a banner reading, "Let's burn all traitors hastening self-destruction." KCNA said similar protests were staged in other cities and provinces across the country. China has waded into the matter, saying it hopes North Korea and South Korea will cooperate through dialogue amid the renewed tensions. Ties between North and South Korea appeared to improve in 2018 when the leaders of both countries met 3 times. Such high-level meetings had not taken place in over a decade. But Pyongyang largely cut off contact with Seoul following the collapse of a summit between Kim Jong-un, its leader, and US President Donald Trump in Hanoi last year that left nuclear talks at a standstill.
Joining us now is Director General at the Bolitag Center for Diplomacy and Strategic Studies, Professor Bola Akinterinwa. Professor Akinterinwa, thank you so much for joining us at this time.
Thank you.
So perhaps we should begin with your reaction to the news of the hour, which is the demise of the Burundi President Pierre Nkurunziza.
Well, every human being created by God one day must die. I wish him, he rests in peace. Second point is that his demise has the potential to pave way for a rethinking about the position of Burundi vis-à-vis the International Criminal Court. Burundi was the first African country to opt out of the agreement done with the organization. Another point is to say that, well, his demise will also give room, at least for his successor, to put an end to the idea of this sit-tight, governance in Africa. So I think that there are many issues involved, even though his successor is supposed to be an ally of his. But the beauty of the fact now is that the whole world will now know that political governance is characterized by transience. So nobody should stay in power without thinking of the time he will opt out, either by resignation, tenure comes to an end, or death. May his soul rest in peace.
And may his soul rest in peace. As we switch over to North and South Korea and the rift between them, and the reason for North Korea cutting off communication with the South, this takes us back another 10 years. So tell us, why do you think the North is doing this?
Well, I think 4 reasons can be quickly adduced. The immediate cause is the issue of North Korean defectors who are living in South Korea, and they are sending, propaganda leaflets to North Korea. That one offended the North Korean government. In 2018, an agreement was reached, and it was done by the sister of the North Korean leader, according to which, for instance, they will put an end to this idea of North Korean sending leaflets to South Korea and vice versa. That one may be a major source of irritation. The second one is that there's an agenda of unification. North Korea, South Korea, putting an end to their disunity. In this case, you know that in the Blue House in South Korea, they even have a whole agency dealing with the questions of unity. But with this development, there is a threat to that. That also angers North Korea. Thirdly, you will recall that Korea used to be the one country before the war. And when they fought their war in the early 50s, in 1953, when the war was to be concluded, they only reached agreement on armistice. They didn't have any peace treaty. So that has been a critical issue which the international community has always ignored. And the fourth factor is the factor of the United States. You know, the North Koreans are also fighting the United States through South Korea. So all these factors put together, and particularly the mere fact that, at the border between the two Koreas, we used to have this 38 parallel dividing the two. And they have this border city where they have their liaison office. So in this case, the place has been threatened, and the sister to the North Korean leader promised that, in fact, she told the whole world last week that they are going to cut off communications at all levels, both military, both everything. So in this case, the offense is now that the future leader, possibly the future leader of North Korea, the sister, is the one now in charge and is trying to reflect her power. I think that's a major dynamic for what we are witnessing.
And with that dynamic, tell us, where do you see relations between North Korea and South Korea going on from here?
Well, I think we are likely to be witnessing a change in continuity. Continuity of the hostility, change of tactics. The major factor likely to bring a sort of entente cordiale will be United States, because the major critical source of misunderstanding between North and South Korea is basically the United States. The United States is the issue. The United States doesn't show any keen interest in the unification of South Korea and North Korea. And again, South Korea is capitalistic in its system. North Korea is communist-oriented. South Korea enjoys the support of Western Europe. North Korea enjoys the Easterners, especially Russia, now, and with China too. So the relationship between North Korea and South Korea should always be seen within the context of a Cold War between the former allies, all right, of the West and the East. So in this case, the future of the relationship will be determined more by external factors than by the domestic disagreements at the level of a bilateral relationship between the two countries.
All right, well, thank you so much again for joining us, Professor Akinteriwa.
Thank you. It's kind of you.
All right, well, today makes 1 year since protests began in Hong Kong against the government and the hundreds of protesters gathered in central Hong Kong to mark the event, as fears over looming national security legislation have reignited unrest in the global financial hub. The crowd defied a government ban on gatherings of more than 8 people due to the coronavirus, as well as a heavy riot police presence on the streets, with officers repeatedly seen conducting searches on those passing through the area. Some held placards reading, "We can't breathe, free HK," and "Young Lives Matter," nods to U.S. protests against police brutality sparked by the death of African-American George Floyd. Last year, on June 9th, it was estimated more than 1 million protesters took to the streets against proposed legislation to allow extraditions to mainland China, where the courts are controlled by the Communist Party. Now to the anti-racism protest in the United States. A statue of Confederate officer John B. Castleman was taken away from its site in Louisville, Kentucky on Monday after being removed from its pedestal. State and city leaders across various U.S. southern states have been stepping up to pull Confederacy monuments from public spaces as national debates flared anew over whether they are symbols of hate or heritage. Demands for the removal of the Castleman statue in Louisville were reignited by recent protests sparked by the death in police custody of African-American George Floyd. The statue, which stood over 100 years, is one of the several monuments to the Confederacy to come down over the years. Today, the final remains of George Floyd, the African-American man killed in police custody and whose death has sparked global protest, goes into its final resting place in Houston after a private family funeral. As part of a tribute to the 46-year-old, his brothers, Philonise Floyd and Rodney Floyd, have spoken about their brother. Over in Houston, American flags are fluttering along the route to the Fountain of Praise Church as hundreds of people wearing masks to prevent the spread of COVID-19 formed a procession. Some bowed their heads while others made the sign of the cross when they reached Floyd's casket.
I want to thank everybody who came out to see my brother and cheer him on the victory for his last lap. Just being here, thinking about my brother, he's a gentle giant. And he had his life taken away when he shouldn't have been. He should have been here speaking on somebody else's behalf right now. As I told you, we grew up together. Eating banana mayonnaise sandwiches. No, seriously, just having fun in a house full of love. It just hurt. Breonna Taylor, everybody. Thank y'all. We will get justice. We will get it. We will not let this door close.
And I tell you what, if he was told he would have to sacrifice his life to bring the world together, and I knowing him, I knowing he would have did it.
Wow.
And I mean, I love this love, and we all hurting as a family.
I stand in solidarity with this family because it mimics my case, and this is personal to me. They have doubled back and claimed another life by a chokehold. That's why we have to fight for justice.
Yes, ma'am.
This family is hurting now, just like I'm hurting. My hurt don't go away. So that's why I know what they are feeling.
Either America will destroy racism or racism will destroy America. In the name of George.
Still ahead on the world today. The inventions just keep rolling in. This one Japan's aging workforce will appreciate. Welcome back to the world today. George Floyd has been remembered by thousands across America, even with a candlelight vigil in Houston, Texas. The vigil, held at his alma mater, Jackie Yates High School, came after a public viewing 2 weeks to the day after Floyd's death was captured by an onlooker's video.
You can use your phone, your flashlights.
By the color of rain, tired people are dying every day. It's time for every man to have an equal chance. Generations in the past, and it starts within.
Channels Television's correspondent in Washington, Maria Byrd, joins us now. Maria, welcome to the program.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
So describe for us the mood across the country as George Floyd is laid to rest today.
You know, it's a somber mood, but I think the real mood is really about how to continue on after this day closes. George Floyd has obviously set fire to so many people as it relates to race relations in America. And so I think that people are hopeful that that same burning desire to look for change continues after today. But it's a somber mood. It's one of reflection. People are, obviously sad that he's passed on, but also hopeful for the future so that not another person dies at the hands of a police officer.
Yeah. Earlier, we heard his brothers talking about him, and one of them said he was bigger. So what are the lessons people have been learning about his life and the reaction to his death?
That's a great question, because I think that so many people oftentimes, when they heard the initial story, you heard that he used a false $20 bill in a store. And you kind of had this image of someone that really was not a contributing citizen to society. And I think that happens so much when you hear about police brutality against especially African-American men, and did not hear this story of this man, as you said, that was really bigger than the giving heart, the football star in Houston, someone that had dreams, his seventh grade teacher said, of becoming a Supreme Court justice. And so this man was not just someone that was doing criminal activity. This was a man that really had pure substance, that was a father, a sibling. He had children that looked up to him, and so many in the community. And so you see there's an former NBA player who was a close friend of his. So he was just not someone that was your average everyday person. I think this story is really allowing people to see that people are so much bigger than what we often see, what's out there and police provide us with the reports on.
Definitely, definitely. And there's still been no word from the president today, and for such a huge issue in America. So as we see conversations over race and equality gather momentum riding on the waves of Floyd's death, has the White House at least acknowledged what's happening today?
The White House has not formally come out. And so obviously that is, I think many people are saddened by that, but it's not unexpected. And I think the whole push for change in America is a result of not having a voice coming from that office very regularly in regards to inequality and race relations. Yes, there have been some tidbits that have come out, but to really put forth effort to say this will change and this is how it will change and this is what the administration will support. We know they don't support defunding police officers or police departments in the U.S., but we have not heard what they do support in regards to how to ensure the change actually happens when you talk about police brutality. We know that 6,000 people were at the public viewing yesterday. And so this is, as you said, a major issue. And it's not just people that know George Floyd, but people that are now connecting to the movement. You know, it's amazing when you see people say, I finally get it. You see signs that are of individuals that are of other races that are saying, I finally get it. White men, white women saying, I finally get it. I finally understand what this is all about. And I am committed to the change.
Well, thank you so much again, Maria, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
The death toll in UK countries continues to rise, despite the WHO saying the pandemic situation in Europe is improving. 286 people have died from the disease in the last 24 hours, while the rest of the world continues to grapple with the disease.
More than 7 million cases of the coronavirus have been confirmed since the outbreak began, along with 404,000 virus-related deaths. And despite the progress in tackling the virus, the WHO says the pandemic is worsening globally.
Almost 75% of yesterday's cases come from 10 countries.
In the United Kingdom, Education Secretary Gavin Williamson has confirmed in the House of Commons that the UK government is not going ahead with its plan to see all English primary school pupils return to classes for 4 weeks before the current term ends in July. Williamson says the government continues to work on the next steps so that those schools that can accept more children in reduced class sizes will be able to do so. There will also be a test and trace approach to schools where pupils show symptoms of the coronavirus. Scotland announces 7 deaths of people who tested positive for the coronavirus in Scotland. Minister Nicola Sturgeon says the figures show further indication of a clear downward trend. There have been 2 consecutive days of 0 deaths registered. In Spain, Health Minister Salvador Illa says wearing face masks will be compulsory in Spain until the coronavirus epidemic is over. When the state of emergency formally ends on July the 21st, the measure will remain in place, and the government is introducing a fine of up to €100, that's about £89, for non-compliance. Like many of its Southeast Asian neighbors, Malaysia has avoided a large COVID-19 outbreak so far. The country's health ministry has just announced the lowest number of new cases for 2 months, but it warned of a separate threat from dengue.
Mira Robotics has developed its Ugo robot to reinforce graying Japan's shrinking workforce. But as the coronavirus threat persists, the Japanese startup is offering its machine as a tool in the fight against the outbreak. The latest feature of the remote-controlled or so-called avatar robot is a hand attachment that uses ultraviolet light to kill viruses on door handles. An unprecedented population decline that is shrinking Japan's workforce by more than 500,000 people a year, as well as a reluctance to bring in foreign labor to fill vacant positions, has spurred robot development in Japan. The emergence of the coronavirus-related demand could further that work. Mira Robotics Ugo is a pair of height-adjustable robotic arms mounted on wheels, operated remotely through a wireless connection with a laptop and game controller. A range-measuring laser mounted on the base helps it navigate, while a panel at the top displays eyes to give it a friendlier appearance. Thanks for joining us on The World Today. I'm Akaite Afia. Stay safe.